So I want you to please put your hands together and welcome one of the top leaders in South Africa, Marno Boshoff.
Thanks, Pierre. Do we have sound here? Hello. That's the best presentation I've ever heard about myself. So if you throw a dice, you can literally believe 50% of that, and I'm still safe. That's okay. Guys, so thank you for the opportunity. Ruan got me, I dropped Ruan last year for the whole year, never supported him with life work, and he got me back this year, and he gave me the most difficult session to do. So thank you, Ruan, a real friend for many years. So let's jump into this, and then what I also found out is when he took my presentation, he said apparently he got my presentation and they stole my video clip and showed it earlier. So thank you for that as well. So I need a lot of that being calm right now. Okay, so this is a session on worldview, and today, and I think you've heard a lot of it, and if you've read about it, and I think if you've read through the material they've supplied, if you get on the internet and you read definitions on worldview, there are just lots and lots and lots of definitions. And depending on the person who wrote its worldview, that defines his definition of worldview, which is also quite interesting. So it's interesting where they stand from that standpoint. But I think one of the interesting things for me just take it there, is one of the biggest interesting things on the definitions of worldview was this. It's not all those various definitions, but one of the things that stood out for me, it says that one of the biggest things that influences your worldview is your point of reference, is where you stand, which is quite logic, isn't it? In other words, whatever you're looking at looks in a specific way depending on where you stand. So your stance looking at this world is quite important, and I'll get into explaining that a little bit more. Now, I just want to see, here's my slide I want to get to really. I've summed up my whole talk in one slide. If you can read it, then it's easy. Okay. This is just, I think of all the different ways it sort of says, and that's why I say your stance. That's where it starts. It starts here. God exists. And then the question is, if you say yes, you can move that way. But if you say no, you can move that way. And if you say, I don't care, or I don't know. And depending from that very first question will determine the rest of your worldview. What is your view about the existence of God? So don't worry, you don't really have to see the detail there. I wasn't serious when I said you have to sort of memorize that. But I think that is the very first question, is your worldview or your belief about God's existence and God's position in everything. So listening to a guy like Andre Steiger just now, from that point of view, you can, and from that stance, your view on handling finances in the kingdom, handling finances because God exists, has a massive influence on the way you're going to structure many things in your life. But that's given, that answer is yes. Now, one of the biggest influences on worldview, if you go and read on it, is what they say is oral tradition. It's what your parents told you, it's what people told you, it's the stories that shaped you. Now, my basic belief about that is to say that I believe that all people, every one of us, was created, and when you were born, you were perfect. You were born perfect, and you were created in God's image perfect, until you met your parents. That's when the problem started. Because I don't know how you grew up. If you also grew up in a house where your mother and your father said to you, Marno, we don't play with those kids. We play with these kids. You don't eat that. Curry is vir Indiërs, né? Die curry. Ons eet net boerewors en pap. And they basically started programming you. The original Greeks basically believed that they said, you are born with what they called a blanco tablet inside you. Your mind, your spirit, everything was empty or blank or clean. And that on that slate got written whatever beliefs the world around you believes. So if I just looked at a couple of these pictures, and once again their detail is not that, but there's I think in America they call it Native Americans, right? Indian family. And the stories they heard about around the campfire is very different than the stories that maybe Jesus taught, that maybe was in a tradition like that. So the question is, first of all, what are the stories that shaped you? If we start just asking that question, what are the stories that shaped your worldview? What are the stories your parents told you, your teachers told you, the world around you told you? Because those stories, once we get our positioning in context with where God is, those stories immediately gets challenged. Could you agree with that? All of a sudden I might realize, but wait a minute, maybe what my mother said isn't all true. Maybe how the stories I heard isn't all true. I had one of those conversations in the car on the way to school, picking up a friend's daughter, driving with us. I've got 2 boys, and they're just normal busy boys, okay? Teenagers, and they don't achieve closely as high as the girl we picked up, okay? So it's that typical high school boy, average marks, with one of those girls in the car that scores 95 averages, okay? So I've warned my boys, you must be very careful what you say. You can sound really stupid in the car, and it often happens. So it happened twice this week again, discussing history of the South African history, what they studied. Eventually my boy just reverted to a very clever answer by telling her, you know, just remember your school, meisies hoor, the difference between your school and our school is, julle is 'n akademiese instelling. And she looked at me and says, and what are you? She says, well, we're not that. We're definitely not that. See, this was his only cop-out line to get out of this academic dominance conversation that we experienced there. So, oral tradition is to question, first of all, from my stance or my new stance towards and in God, what are the stories I need to question? Now, you might have seen this. Everyone has a worldview, but once again, depending on your stance, has a massive influence. How you were raised, what type of house you were raised in, your family, were they Christians or not. Every single thing, basically, people, influences your worldview. And if you go and read all the definitions, it's everything I believe about everything. And that's worldview. So as a Christian, wanting to know how to make the right decisions and have the right stance, this is what we will then continually have to challenge. Now let's just see if this is an awareness that you have come to. It seems that God's worldview is very similar to mine in many ways. He loves the same people I love, dislikes the same ones I don't like. He also has the same political, economic, and social perspectives on the world as I do. It's wonderful to live so aligned. And by the way, I think if I asked him, he might even support the Bulls. He's not that dumb. Now, if the answer on that last one is yes, then the world is in a terrible state. Okay, then we're in a very dangerous place. If we know God supports the Bulls. Okay, but sorry, this is Pretoria, so let me be quiet. I grew up in a proper town called Bloemfontein, so I have a different worldview than the people living in this city. Thank you, Ron. But coming back to some of that first statements, do you think God has the same worldview as you? Have you ever asked that question at least, you know? So how much difference is there between God's thinking about this world and my thinking? The reason I put it that way is subtly, we actually think we're quite aligned with God, or maybe God is quite aligned with us, which is obviously already a problem if I see it that way around. But we very often don't really go and think and say, well, you know, Marno, God really doesn't think about people the way you do. He really thinks very different about people than what I do. And that my thinking and the way I look and see and easily judge, etc., is far more limited than God's view in various ways. And that would be those awakenings of realizing, but wait, God sees somebody like this, and I thought of them like this. Every single small awakening like that is a change in my worldview and changes the way I see things. So very often I think we need to understand that The culture as we know it in South Africa, your culture, however you want to define it, everything that's visible is 100% influenced by what is invisible. What is seen is 100% influenced by what is not seen. Meaning, I can't see your thoughts. I can't see your motives. I can't see your beliefs. I can't see what is happening inside you. I can just see your behavior. That's all I can see. So everything in the visible, in the physical, is 100% influenced by my worldview, which is unseen. So for me to know what you believe, all I have to do is I have to watch you intently for a while and see what you do. Oh, he did that. So I guess what he believes is this. Oh, he handles people of different gender like this, or people of different race. He says this or that. So I assume his beliefs about race is this, about gender, about age, etc. So we can only look at people's behavior. That's all they see. That's all we can see. Like somebody once said, yes, but God looks at your heart. Yeah, but that's God. We cannot see your heart. We can only see your actions. You can explain your heart to me, you can explain many things to me, but I can only see your actions, you can only see my actions. So this is one of those, you've all seen an iceberg, one of these slides, right? This is, I think, the most known slide out there. The thing about this slide, I guess it stays true as often as it has been used. But it always shows us that whatever is below the waterline is much more than what is above the waterline. It's always much more. It's much more going on internally in me than externally. I can stand here and just be quiet for a minute or two, and it looks like nothing is happening, right? But I can be standing here looking at people, judging people, saying things, or not saying things, just a lot of stuff happening internally, and you don't know until I do something, say something, or make you aware of something above the waterline. It was so interesting. Last year, my wife's been quite sick for a year, and at a certain stage she became a little bit better, and she could just every now and then, maybe once in 2 or 3 months, she could actually go to a closer shop to our house, and she would try and endeavor to go out there. But she would need to take the lady working in our house with her. So the gogo working in our house would go with her, and she would sort of push the tray and pick up things. And what was interesting, when they get back in the car, our gogo would say to my wife, to Bia, did you see how the people looked at us? And she would say that. She says, yeah, I saw it. And she said that the thing she became aware of the most was the judgment. Like, who's this lady, taking somebody with her to the shops and having everything packed into the what do you call it, the vaantjie. But they could pick, and what was interesting is this conversation between them afterwards, saying how judged they felt because of how people would actually look and stare at them. But they didn't know what the situation was, and that is so often for us. So what is the beliefs when you see something? Those things activate certain beliefs in your inner being, in your mind. So what do I believe when I see people of whatever place? I'm going to get into this a little bit deeper just now. So Ravi Zacharias, I think you've seen him on a video clip earlier. And Ravi is one of the most well-known Christian apologetics in the world today. And he uses these 4 points, saying that these, and if you go, there's various, once again, opinions on this, but he uses these 4, and I like them. He says, these are the 4 main things that influences your worldview. Number 1, the origin of everything. Where does everything come from? Number 2, what's the meaning of everything, or what is the purpose of everything? The ethical view you have of what is true. Very important, not what's right or wrong, what's true. It's a difference. And then fourthly, what is the destiny, or where does everything lead to, or where is everything going towards? What's the end of everything? Now, if you take those 4 pointers, there's quite a lot of, I would actually have liked to just pause everything here, right here, and say, okay, let's now assess ourselves on those 4 points. What do I believe about my own origin or where do I come from? Well, and I'm not meaning physically, I'm more meaning what has God destined me for? What is God's purpose or meaning with my life? How am I going about fulfilling God's purpose on my life? And what do I believe is the thing I need to reach, except just for heaven, in this world? But if I take those 4 things, I think that can keep you busy for quite a while. Those are 4 of the basic pointers that we anchor our worldview in. I basically believe, where does everything come from? I was at a launch of a ministry recently, and it was a ministry of people that's working with women that works on the street and in brothels and things like that. And it was there was an old lady speaking, older than me lady speaking, and she was just amazing, her stories. And she would tell us how they would go and stand on the streets next to the pimps and next to these ladies that work, night workers on the streets. And she would tell us how upset she would get with some of these pimps, how they abuse the girls, how incredibly abusive environment it is. And she was telling the story of how she once saw how one of these guys actually hit one of the girls with a fist in the face right in front of her. And she just took the girl and took her away, and she thought, what a bad person. She's actually walked away. God stopped her and said, stop, go back. You see that guy? I really love him. I really, really love him. Sure, and that just so spoke to me, because my judgmental reflex would have been right in there, judging him with any possible bad words I have in my vocabulary. I would have labeled that guy immediately. And she says every time she wanted to judge somebody in that ministry, working with people like that, every single time God would just tell her, I really love those people. I really, really love them. And that's a worldview. That is a renewed mind. That is a different way of looking at people. And listening to her, my view was challenged. I realized I'm not there. I need to move a little bit in my ability of grace and etc. I want to use this. I want to bring it a little bit closer. So this is a model we use when we work with organizations and we drive culture. So I'm going to bring it a little bit. First part I spoke of now was just a broader or wider aspect of worldview. But let's bring it a little bit closer. So what we usually do with companies, so I want to bring it to your company today, your work environment, your whatever you are busy with, involved in and do. So right in the middle we have that purpose or vision or strategy or brand promise or whatever that is. That's your why. Why do you exist? Call it then the origin, your worldview of origin. Why do you exist? But if you want to drive that, and now this links to our iceberg, I first have to understand what your beliefs are. Those beliefs or values or your thinking models, what are the things you believe about business? Well, I caught the last while of Andre's talk when I came in, and some of the stories he told, just out of his stories, I could hear his beliefs. Is that right? So one of his beliefs is what he said at the end is, don't chase money, chase the client. Serve the client better. So it's a belief they've got. They've adopted it in their system and in the organization. That would influence their culture. I sometimes say to people, listen, when you do exercise like, or let's say value clarification, I would actually say, just forget the word values for a minute. Because very often when we talk about values, we ask people, what's your values? Your mind automatically goes to the nice words in the dictionary, right? If I had to quickly ask you, what would you prefer? What ideal values would you esteem in your company? Your mind would go to the nice words of integrity and honesty and transparency, etc. So I said, just forget that. Okay, just forget all those nice words. Tell me what you believe, how you should do business. And then it's sort of a different conversation. Tell me what your real beliefs about doing business. I don't know what they are today, but that would be a question you need to answer for yourself. What are my beliefs? To what extent will I do what for business, for money, etc.? And that's not a quick question. I guess that needs to be. But those are the things that drives. And I always say to people, once you've once you've clarified your beliefs, once you know what you believe about business, which is your worldview about business, handling people, money, everything going with that. Once you've clarified that, making your decision or your enablers or your levers is quite easy. Because if we have a conversation later of, listen, what should the leadership be like, or where should we use resources, or what metrics should we use, etc., etc., it's quite easy. It all falls in place because your beliefs have been clarified. How should we spend money? Well, it's easy. We discuss what we're going to do with money. We want to give away this, or we want to do that, or we invest it in our people, etc., etc. So if your beliefs are not clear, you will not easily clarify those things, and you won't be sure. But in your behavior, that's where a lot of your decision making. But your decision making externally lies on this. But for that, you need to question and question and question and question our own beliefs to understand what we truly believe. Because very often, I find working with coaching clients or working with myself, I'm not sure what this is always. I need to continuously probe into it and to see what's at the bottom of my beliefs. Sometimes I think I believe certain things until somebody says something that upsets me. Then I realize that belief I thought I had is very shallow. In fact, I'm not even sure I'm convinced of that belief, because it seems like my behavior is quite different when I'm pushed. Somebody once said, it's very easy to say one thing and do something else. It's quite easy to have a disconnect between what I say and what I do. When I used to be in the ministry, I always said, yes, if I can just do all the sermons I've preached, I would be as smart as he introduced me. Really. If I could just do everything I've preached, that would be fantastic. But those two worlds are quite easily separated, what I say and what I do. But what I do and what I believe can never be separated. What I believe and what I do are always aligned. Does that make sense? You want to think about that for 30 seconds? Because that's a thought that keeps me busy very often. It's easy to say one thing to you and walk out and do something else. But if I do that, it means that's what I believe. What I said is not what I believe. I just said it. It's easy to say things. But my beliefs is always aligned with my behavior. So if I want to see what people really believe, they don't have to tell me. I just need to look at their behavior. That's all. Then I can, out of that, subtract beliefs. And then a while ago I had somebody sitting with me, and I tried not to say something for about an hour. I decided I'm not going to speak. I just have to listen. For 60 minutes, it was a test for me. I lasted 55 minutes. And the temptation was too big. Eventually I said something. It was one of those meetings I just had to be quiet, but I couldn't. Okay, so once again. And the reason was, somebody was trying to explain to me how culture works. And it's a temptation when somebody explains to you how it works, and that's what you do every day, and you think, well, I think different. But where I couldn't hold it was when they said, when I heard what they believed, but all I heard from the mouth was bitterness and pain and bad-mouthing people. And eventually I said, whoa, stop. I would know iets say. I said, your language, which is just an evidence of your culture, what you're telling me you believe, I don't hear it in your language. I hear you're upset. I think you haven't forgiven. That's what I think. I think you've got bitterness in you, in your whole system. I was referring to the whole system, not in him as a person. I said, because I'm still hearing in your language, I hear bitterness, pain, referring to people and speaking negative about people, etc., etc. I said, so may I just throw this in the last 5 minutes? Don't you just want to go and check your heart if you still have bitterness? Maybe you haven't forgiven. And then they were quiet. I said, because remember, you've been talking to me about culture for 55 minutes, but all I can tell you, one of the evidences of culture is language. I just have to listen to what you say. So if I just listen to my own words very often, I can very quickly measure or gauge, if I'm honest with myself, Marno, where are you really at? Where are your beliefs really at? So those are the drivers, the enablers or the levers, and the outcomes. So if that is something, let me throw this quickly in there. Just see that, let's just stay there. One of the things, values and beliefs, when people are in the workplace, is there's one of two beliefs. I either believe that my effort makes a difference, or I believe my effort doesn't make a difference where I'm at. If I believe that my effort makes no difference, it means my behaviors in my workplace is that I have to. If I believe my effort makes a difference, then I want to. There's the big difference between have to and want to in my behaviors. And that would lead to a performance which is either engaged or disengaged. So one of the things about your own worldview, about yourself, and I want to take this talk more towards that, your own worldview about yourself and your positioning where you currently are in an organization, a company, in the world, your own company, whatever it is. Do you believe that your effort makes a difference? Because if you're in a place where you don't believe your effort makes a difference and you are disengaged in your own world, then I'll be concerned. Because I don't think that's what God wants. God wants you engaged, and God wants you making a difference where you're at. But what is your belief about that? The moment I feel that disengagement and I feel that I don't think I'm causing any change and I don't think I have any influence, it influences me quite negatively on the want to versus have to. And I'm not going to give you graphs and stats today, but there's lots of studies done in the world. What's the outcome of organizations with want to versus have to, literally on performance and eventually on shareholder returns and stuff like that. So when we drive culture, we drive engagement. My personal opinion is that a Christian worldview drives the highest level of engagement because there's a whole different aspect to it. A Christian worldview convinces or convicts me and says, but Marno, you're not just here for yourself. You are actually here, if I look at that, I believe God has purpose and meaning and everything for me. And I think that is the thing that is quite important to finalize and to make sure in your own heart. What is your stance or what is your position towards God calling you? And if you've got that conviction, your worldview towards your own work situation radically changes. How much time do I have, Ron? 5 minutes. I'm going to skip this a little bit. I'm just going to quickly say what we just usually say is when you want to change organizations, outward change is the easiest, and it's short term if you want to change anything physically, but if you really want to do inward change, which is much more difficult, but it's extremely long term, then you need to change values, beliefs, and norms. It's easy to change those things or just make changes externally and physically, and it will look nice and look different. But if you really want to change the culture in any organization, you're going to have to get in here where the values, beliefs, and norms, which is just once again back to your iceberg picture. Let me quickly throw in one example. So there's a lot of complexity. Complexity can be dynamic or static. I'm not going to go into that. But it can also be necessary and unnecessary. One of the first exercises to always, sometimes we take people through an exercise, just determining what complexity in your life currently is necessary, what is unnecessary. Being married is necessary complexity. Okay, it causes growth. If you come home and you tell your wife, I met another nice lady today, it might be very unnecessary complexity you bring into that system. Very, very unnecessary. And you will have to deal with a lot of resistance for quite a while. So don't do that. Understand? So complexity leads to conflict. But conflict can be solved in one of two ways. Either through coherence, I'm just going to put both up, or chaos. So if I go into a conflict situation, I can either decide, okay, let's go to war. You and I, we're going to fight. This is very complex. Conflict is taking me, either you're going to fight, or we are going to cohere, which is when all the parts fit together as a whole. So I want to bring unity, I want to bring restoration. It is complex, but at least I'm going to build coherence. But to building coherence, I can do it in two ways. I can either do it in a civil way or in a coercion way. The coercion means using force or threats to persuade people. So I can decide, okay, this is a complex situation. Conflict is about to arise, but okay, I'll do it. I'll create coherence. I won't go for war. I'm going to create coherence by just telling everybody what they must do. and I'll just force them to do it, and I'll get that. Or I can use civility. I can be civil in my behavior. Well, I want to get to this point, just want to show you one example of how worldview leads to behavior. Civility, being civil with somebody, and creating that is based on respect. Respect has two underlying mental models, which is, I either have a view of other people in this world as having different abilities and strengths than me, then I can respect them. Or I have a view that people come with more shortcomings and flaws than me. Now, which one do you believe? I'm not asking which one is right. That's a different question. I'm asking which one you believe. In other words, if you sometimes find yourself thinking, but I think I'm just better, cleverer, my strengths are better than them in this, then you have an absolute inability for respect. You can't respect somebody if your belief is, I think the other people here has more shortcomings and flaws. But luckily it's only me thinking that sometimes in this hall. You all think everybody is fantastic, they're just different. But I wanted to bring it down to something like this. It's just a very practical way of showing you a worldview. The moment I have a worldview of superiority, I cannot respect. If I cannot respect, it means I'm going to create coherence in the wrong way. So if you find yourself very often using maybe wrong methodology to create unity, to get people together, but you have to use it by force or whatever, ask yourself what's really the worldview you have about people. And this is a challenging maybe way of looking at it. Asking yourself what is really the way you look at people. So let's leave that. This is a terrible slide I built last night. Really a bad slide. I'll tell you why. Because I know when I articulate something well, and I know when I'm not articulating it well, and this is not well articulated. So actually, I wanted to do this slide to test and have your input help me build a better slide. Okay, so I'm open for input on this one. Let's just call it 3 different types of views. And the reason why I'm saying this is that this is not a mature thinking model I've got here. It's just it's just me late at night. Okay, so the first one is a type A. I was trying to express the following 3 views. Do I think I am a Christian doing business? And I'm just trying to let my light shine for all to see. I'm a bit of a hidden Christian. Let's just call it that. A type B might be, I am a Christian business person. In other words, at least now I'm in my own mind, I am marrying those 2 concepts, Christian business. That tries to use my business as a vehicle to touch the lives of my employees through my lifestyle and my words, maybe in an authentic way. Or thirdly, I am an evangelist that uses my business as the main platform to preach the gospel, come hell or high water. And I'll force you to understand the Bible if you want to. If you work for me, I will tell you. So I don't know, and I'm not trying to, what I didn't try to do, I did not try to put which one is right. I was trying to think of people I work with often, and I often find something related to these 3 different approaches of Christians in the marketplace. And there's pros and cons for all 3. There's people saying, I work for a boss who would never tell you he's a Christian, but he's a fantastic Christian, and I want to be like him. There's people working for bosses who says, man, I've got a Christian boss that he tells everybody, and we really don't like him. He's a terrible person. And we've got something of everything. The reason I put this up, I was trying to build a slide on this and trying to formulate my own thinking, was actually to just ask you, how do you see yourself? And I don't know what's right and what's wrong. I just want to know what's your view about yourself. How do you think you're living out your own concept, understanding of yourself in the marketplace? John, if you had more time, we could discuss this around the table, so discuss it tonight with whoever you want to, okay? Does it make sense? Just my questions at least. Some of you look very concerned, so I hope that's because you're thinking now. Okay, I'm also concerned. Like I said, I warned you ahead of time, it's not a great slide, but it's, I was trying to articulate, and maybe that's where you are at in your own life, saying, I'm also trying to articulate my own standing and my own positioning and my own influence within the marketplace. So, what is your worldview regarding your current position? Using those 4 points, I've given it to you. I think one of the things I would like to leave with you is that you take those 4 pointers and ask yourself, what is your own worldview regarding your own position? Because these are things I try to make sure that, I don't know, I was trying to this afternoon not to try and give you a great storyline or a great speech or something. I'm trying to get you thinking, and that's all I wanted to really do. I want to get you thinking. If I can get you thinking and say, yes, I really need to think, how am I positioning myself to the most effective way and means, and are there limitations in my thinking of how I see myself in the marketplace? Are there reasons why I am eliminating myself? Are there reasons, or are there things in your thinking why you're disqualifying yourself? Then maybe you can clarify that again today and say, but wait a minute, God has called me. God has a purpose for me. I need to reach something. I need to do something for Him. I need to clarify that. And my worldview must be that God has placed me here. And God has a purpose and a destiny for what I'm busy with. I'm not just floating. And I need to clarify that. So let me conclude with 2 verses, 2 different translations. When I think of worldview, I'm thinking of these scriptures, Matthew 6, for where your treasure is, there your heart will also be. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. And this one, for your heart will always pursue what you value as your treasure. So your behavior will align with your value, whatever you value. The eyes of your spirit allow the revelation light to enter into your being. If your heart is unclouded, the light floods in. If your heart is unclouded. Sure, that's a big statement in small words. Determining what has clouded my heart. What is it that clouds me of seeing wrongly or seeing differently or not seeing it the way I should be seeing it? What is clouding you at this moment to not see clearly as you should be or could see? I could look at the world around you. I think that would be an important aspect. Thank you very much. So I hope there's a couple of questions I left you with. That's what I really would have liked to do, is to leave you with some questions that you need to ask yourself, because creating let's call it the right worldview that God wants of all of us is a journey, just as my experience. It's a journey of continuously discovering what God is busy with me. And if you could use something of one of those slides today to just point you and ask yourself critical questions again and steer you into a closer way, I would be glad. Thank you, Ron.